Go. Hello and welcome to Signal Lantern, your beacon of freedom in the Northeast. I'm actually here at Cape Gunworks today, sitting down with Toby Leary to talk about Chapter 135. So, Toby, what is Chapter 135?
Yeah, what the heck are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. Chapter 135 is a gun control bill that was passed it was signed into law in August, I guess, or late July of 2024 by Maura Healey after the legislature had passed the bill, which started out as HD 4420 and then turned into 4885. And then there was a Senate version, and then there was a couple other iterations. Then it got put on ice for a while as the House and the Senate versions were trying to reconcile the bill. So that went on for months behind closed doors. No public could participate in any of those talks or whatnot. So finally, it emerged on July 18th of 2024 and came out around 8 p.m. after the conference committee had done all the work they're going to do. The very next day, I think actually that might have been the 17th, and then on the 18th, the House and the Senate had both signed it by 2:30 in the afternoon, so less than 24 hours after it came out. And this bill is, 100 plus pages. I promise you nobody read it. That's the one thing I promise. Nobody read it. No one knew what was in there. 116 plus pages of gun control that affects every aspect of firearms ownership in the state of Massachusetts, from FID cards to LTCs, about what class you got to take, about what gun you can own, about new features on guns. We've been living under the 94 assault weapon ban since 94, even though the rest of the country had sunsetted in 2004. Massachusetts made it permanent in 1998. So what they did was they wanted to add to it. It's never good enough in this state. Gun control is a endless endeavor that they won't quit until they've banned every single gun in the state. But I digress. They've expanded the definition. They actually changed assault weapon into assault style weapon. So now they're saying these aren't even technically assault weapons under our old definition. These are now considered assault style weapons. And they added a whole new host of features that make them fit that category, like a handguard. Well, a handguard's been on every long gun since the 1500s,
Right.
And an adjustable stock to make it comfortable to shoot the gun based on your size. A vertical foregrip, which can help you exhibit more control over the gun. A pistol grip on a long gun so that you can have more control and aim and shoot it more accurately. What they're inferring by all of this is that the law should not help you put more control over the weapon that you're shooting. You shouldn't be able to shoot it more accurately and have more control. It should be ill-fitting. You should be burning your hand as you shoot rounds on target, and you shouldn't be able to grip the gun in a safe and responsible way. That's basically what they're telling you. And they're saying that this is all about safety. Well, how does not being able to shoot the gun as safely as possible and as accurately as possible, how does that not make us all more safe? It doesn't, right? So anyway, that's just one of the major categories. Then there's all kinds of stuff like people who owned pre-ban magazines. So magazines that were owned prior to 1994 that hold more than 10 rounds, they were always grandfathered in, and you could carry them, you could shoot with them, you could stage them in your home for self-defense. Well, under Chapter 135, if you own or possess those magazines, they've moved the chains one step closer to confiscating them and said, you can still hold on to those mags, but you can only use them at the range.
Right.
They must be unloaded when you transport to and from the range. You can no longer stage them in the home for self-defense. You can no longer have them in your gun for carriage, on your body. And again, who is that making safe? it's only making safe the people who may go door to door someday to take your guns away, because it's not helping you defend your home. It's not helping you defend your neighborhood or your family if you're out in public. So, that's just, again, one of the small categories. What the people who brought about Chapter 135 have very effectively done is push to the forefront three things. One, they say it strengthens our red flag laws. For those of you who don't know what a red flag law is, it means that pretty much anybody now can say that you threatened me with your gun and I'm scared for my life, and the police can act on this. They can issue this red flag. It's extreme risk protection order is the technical definition of it. And now they'll come to you, they'll knock on your door, they'll seize your license to carry and your firearms, and then it's your job to prove that you're not a threat to somebody. And this is all based on the word of somebody. It's not, there's no evidence presented. You're not in a court. You're not even confronting your accuser. You have this boogeyman that says you're a bad guy, and now you got to prove you're not.
Right.
So they take the guns, and then without any due process, and then you have to prove your innocence before the, finder of fact. The second area, they scare people into wanting to support this horribly unconstitutional laws. They say it has expanded or it's made illegal ghost guns. The word ghost gun or phrase ghost gun does not appear anywhere in the 116-page document. What they've done is they've taken a long-standing tradition of privately made firearms that you can do and legally and lawfully do in the privacy of your own home. This dates back to before our country was a country. It's a practice that has been done forever. And they've made that a criminal offense. If you don't first seek permission from the state to do it, given a serial number in advance, and tell them exactly what kind of gun you're planning to make. And then when you're done with it, you register it with the state. So they say that's going to make us all safer by making sure the good people are checking all these boxes and doing what they're supposed to be doing. But that doesn't stop criminal element from doing it and doing whatever they want. And the third thing that they love to scare people about is, they say ghost guns, machine guns, and this extreme risk protection order. Well, the funny thing about it is it does absolutely zero to regulate further machine gun ownership in Massachusetts. What they're implying is that they're trying to drum up fear for a device that was already illegal prior to Chapter 135, which is known as a switch, that would convert a gun into fully automatic fire illegally by illegally making a machine gun, which has been illegal to do since 1986 in this country. So that's how they're stoking fear into people and saying, we're regulating machine guns, we're regulating ghost guns, we're strengthening our red flag laws, which basically means anyone can red flag anyone now at the word of somebody, and they're going to act on it, and then you'll have to prove your innocence. So that's it in a nutshell. But this goes so much further beyond all of that. In fact, another thing it does is it regulates what youth hunters can hunt with. Now, if you're under 18, you can no longer hunt with a semi-automatic shotgun, when that was very advantageous to do with a lot of young hunters because it absorbs a lot of the recoil by the cycle and the action of the gun. Right. So now hunters have to bear the pain of the full recoil of the gun. It also makes it illegal for non-resident hunters to hunt with a semi-automatic shotgun. We got a letter last year, an email last year from some guys from Alberta, Canada that wanted to come to the Cape for the they're on the pursuit of the duck super slam, where they can shoot every species of ducks that's legal to hunt. And we have a whole host of those species that they don't get to hunt in other parts of the country or even in Canada. So Cape Cod is unique to that. And a lot of the fishermen that do fishing charters all summer long, they pay the bills over the winter by doing duck hunting excursions. And this gentleman from Alberta, Canada said, I never thought I'd see the day where America's laws are more strict than Canada's laws, because he can't bring his Benelli Super Black Eagle, 12 gauge shotgun to America to hunt, because Massachusetts has banned non-resident from hunting with semi-automatic shotgun. And one of the other things that they did was make it illegal for anyone who possesses an FID card. So that's a little different than the license to carry. And they've further widened the gap between the two to make sure that if you only have an FID card, a firearms ID, you can't possess any semi-automatic shotgun or rifle, period, or handgun at all, where you used to be able to have non-large capacity. And now you can't possess any of them. So there's a lot of people that don't even realize they've had grandpa's, Browning A5 shotgun that they grew up hunting ducks with grandpa, and they've inherited it, and they only have an FID card. Well, they're a felon in waiting, because if they don't upgrade to the LTC, then, and they only maintain the FID card because all they do is hunt ducks, well, they're in big trouble, because they will be in possession of a gun. Even though they went through the background check, they took the class, they paid the fee, they got the license, and 2 years ago it was perfectly legal for them to have that gun. Now it's illegal for them to have that gun, and the gun of government violence is leveled against them if they don't comply.
Right.
It's crazy.
And I mean, speaking about the LTCs as well, didn't the rules behind getting an LTC change? They got much stricter.
Yep. Yeah, there's now a requirement by the state, and ironically, let me back up a little bit. They signed this into law in July of 2024. October rolls around. We formed the Civil Rights Coalition, which was a ballot committee that was formed to repeal this law, veto this law. Through a citizen's petition, we can veto this law on the ballot. We're on the ballot November 3rd. But as we were doing our signature gathering campaign, the state was almost laughing at us at first, like, we'll see how far this goes. And then once they realized we were going to not only receive the required amount of signatures, but far exceed it and get enough to suspend the law until Election Day, Maura Healey jumped into action and signed what's known as an emergency preamble. This is usually done by the legislature, and it's only for certain conditions. It has to meet 4 conditions. It has to be for the peace, the health, the safety, or the convenience of the public. None of those conditions were met. There was no emergent condition that was causing the need for her to act. In fact, I think it's completely unprecedented that a governor has done this 71 days after signing it into law. She signs it into law, which means it goes into effect immediately instead of the 90 days it normally takes for a law to go into effect. Signs it 19 days early, goes into law, and then the legislature has to get to work and suspend entire portions of the law because it couldn't be implemented the day that she signed the emergency preamble. One of the things they punted on was the licensing requirements for 18 months. So the law put the burden upon the state police to come up with the new curriculum, to come up with the live fire course of fire, to come up with the de-escalation portion of it, and the kind of what to do if you encounter a mass shooter threat. Like, this is ridiculous. This is just so people can exercise their right to keep and bear arms in the state of Massachusetts. It's absolutely ludicrous to think that, somebody who's never shot a gun and is going to figure out how to get their license in this state so that they can exercise a right should have to go through de-escalation training and encountering a mass shooter threat training and doing a live fire course of fire with a pass fail. And we still, to this day, that 18-month period has expired. We still, to this day, do not know what the live fire curriculum is supposed to be. They're basically continuing to punt on this and say, just keep doing what you were doing. And, they're putting the burden on us to figure it out,
Right.
even though the state specifically put the burden on the state police to write a curriculum and come up with it. And they're like, where are we getting the money for this?
Right.
So that's one of the other things. Yeah.
Yeah, and wasn't the hour requirement? It used to be just a 4-hour safety course was all you needed to get your LTC. Now it's increased to like 16 hours or something.
There wasn't then, and there isn't now, an actual time requirement, but it's to cover all the stuff that they want you to cover. It's taking a lot longer than it used to. Let's put it that way. It might have, I think it's fair to say it doubled the amount of time it took to check all the boxes to teach the course. And, so that's just an extra burden on the person who has to take that class and teach that class, and the cost and the time and whatnot. And I'm a big training guy. I believe good, responsible people should take a training class on how to shoot their gun. And we used to honestly we were very honest about what the LTC class is all about. This is the how to get my license class. You're not going to leave this class and be John Wick, right? You're not going to leave this class and be some expert gun guy. There's no chance of that. What you are going to do is realize, oh, I need to check this box because the state has put this burden and encumbrance and infringement upon, or a roadblock to me exercising my right to keep and bear arms. It doesn't make us any safer in society by requiring this. All it does is put a roadblock and make it harder for good people to exercise their rights. Then after they get the license, I believe it's a good idea and a responsible thing to do to get actual firearms training that goes beyond the 5 or 10 shots you're going to shoot in some government required class. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And I I almost hate to say it because I don't want to give the government more ideas. Is it a requirement when, say I did the 4-hour course to get my LTC, when I go to renew it, I'm not going to have to take all these additional trainings now, am I?
So there's a scenario brewing where if you got your license after August 1st, 2024, you will have to retake this course with the live fire component when you renew. Now, think about the idiocracy of that. Here's a license, go have fun for 5 years, and when it is time to renew, now you got to come back and take the course that the state police still hasn't developed and figured out what it should look like. But when we figure it out, we're going to make sure you have to retake it because you were licensed after 8/1 when the new requirement was required. We just don't know what the new requirement is. So therefore, you're going to have to retake it.
Right.
Madness. I think that'll immediately be struck down in court, but we'll see. You never know in this court.
Yeah, you can really only hope. But no, I was talking more for people that had their license prior to the law going into effect. They're not going to be forced to see, and that's that ridiculous double standard. So okay, I don't have to take it when it renews, but now do they count my license as getting it after that time? So then the next time I got it's just this whole ridiculous scenario. And yeah, you're right. There's just too many unknowns. It almost feels too scary. to try to get your license, to try and get a firearm. And I feel like that's almost what the state is trying to do, is dissuade people that don't have it from getting it.
There's no doubt in my mind that is exactly what they are trying to do. There's actually a lot of evidence to support that. When Gun Owners Action League sued the state over the assault weapon ban, they lost in district court, lost in First Circuit Court of Appeals, appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court didn't grant certiorari. They haven't done an arms ban case yet. I'm sure that day will come, and hopefully soon. But during the whole trial of in district and First Circuit Court of Appeals, Gun Owners Action League FOIA'd all of the internal memos and documents from the Executive Office of Public Safety, from the Attorney General's office, from the legislature and whatnot, about what the intent of the law was. And the emails and the information that they were able to get was 100%. This will slow the stem of firearm sales in Massachusetts. That's really their whole goal. I don't know if they really believe it, but they teach a very hoplophobic paradigm, which means there's an irrational fear of guns, right? They believe that, or they teach, I don't know if they truly believe it. I don't think they do. I think they are relying on the fact that the public doesn't know any better. So they're stoking these fears into the public, basically, and teaching using, and media carries their water for them and says basically the presence of a gun makes us all less safe. So if they can stop the proliferation of firearms in the state by any means necessary, whether it be through licensing, whether it be through background checks, whether it be through, you forgot your PIN number when you went to buy a gun, that you already got your mass license to carry, and you're not a prohibited person. The feds gave you the green light on your background check. Oh, but you don't have your PIN number with you. Guess what? You don't get to go home with that gun that day. So this is all the steps and the hoops and the things they make you jump through in order to exercise a constitutionally protected right. And it's all about slowing you down, making it harder for you to exercise your right. And nobody would suffer the same treatment for any other right. But yet here we are in 2026, living almost in a dystopian type of movie behind the lines in Massachusetts, trying to comply with the checkerboard of unconstitutional laws that they've passed.
Yeah, no, I know that not even it doesn't even stand up to the Massachusetts state constitution either. I mean, Article 17 literally says the right of the people to keep firearms for the common defense.
Right.
The fact that our legislature literally passed a law that can't even stand up to our state constitution's scrutiny.
Right.
Who?
Well, they actually say, they literally say, oh, this law doesn't infringe anybody's rights. Not at all. It doesn't affect your rights at all, period. It's what they say. It's like, the old saying, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining outside. Like they're literally gaslighting you and saying, yeah, we're not affecting your rights. Well, how is it you're not affecting my rights when guns that are legal for sale just about everywhere in the country I can't buy in the state? Well, you can buy something else. Okay, well, let's use that standard for a second. What's to prevent you now from going on to Beacon Hill as this self-appointed, giver of rights and saying, we're going to ban Catholics, right? They could, if all it takes is a simple majority in the State House, then they could just ban Catholics, right? And when you complain and say, no, you can't, I have a First Amendment right to freedom of religion, they say, well, yeah, we're not affecting that right at all. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Hare Krishna, you can be a Mooney, you can be a Jehovah's Witness, you can be a, you know, Mormon, you can do whatever you want. You just can't be a Catholic. Well, that's what they're doing with the firearms and telling you they're not doing it. It's insane. It's madness. Under the Heller decision in 2008, the Supreme Court of the United States said that any arm that is in common and ordinary use for lawful purposes cannot be banned. Period, full stop. Yet here we are living under, one of the biggest arms bans in, modern history in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and wasn't that the Heller decision was also reinforced with the Bruin decision, right?
Yeah, the Bruin decision basically resurrected the Heller decision and said, hey guys, this is good law. And this law is the precedent that we are going to go by. What the big difference between the two cases was, the Heller precedent didn't give the courts kind of this paint by number approach on how to rule on arms ban cases. So from Heller until Bruin, they still used interest balancing approach or tiers of scrutiny or, government interest as their standard. So in other words, if government says it's beneficial to society to ban these type of arms or to do this type of thing or enact this level of gun control, then they were good with it. Well, Bruin took issue with that because under Heller, they really did deal with the textual analysis of the Second Amendment as the first step. And then they went on to like government interest or tiers of scrutiny or interest balancing approach or the, it's good for society, so we're going to weigh on that. But Bruin said, no. This is a constitutional fundamental right. You don't get that second step. In fact, Clarence Thomas said the two-step approach is one step too many. You must stop at the text. If the text doesn't provide for your regulation that you are trying to uphold, then the burden shifts to government to prove that there is a historical analogous law from the founding era that is consistent with the law that you are trying to uphold today. So take an arms ban case. If the Supreme Court gets an arms ban case, it's going to lose badly. The Supreme Court is going to overturn every state arms ban case that is out there. I promise you that. And hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later, because on the textual analysis, well, what does the text say? It says a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The preamble to that is showing that the necessity of a militia is why the people have a right to keep and bear arms. It's not to put food on the table. It's not to hunt ducks. It's not to, even keep bad guys at bay. It's to make sure that we can maintain a militia. Why? Because you already pointed out Article 17 of the state constitution, which says the right of the people to keep and bear arms for the common defense. Then it goes on to say, while at times of peace, a standing army is dangerous to freedom. Why is that? Well, they just watched what happened with Great Britain occupying the streets of, Philadelphia, Boston, and, all the other cities throughout the colonies. And they knew that these tyrannical armies, they occupied people's homes, they ate their food, they took what they wanted, they imposed taxes and levies, and they basically had their way with them. And they said, this is dangerous to freedom. I can't partake in freedom. I don't have the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness because of what's going on. So getting back to the Second Amendment, that whole textual analysis of that 28 words that I quoted falls short. There's no arms ban provision there, right? So now the burden shifts to government to say, yep, in 1791, the, you know, communities, the states, the federal government, there's a long standing tradition of the arms ban that, or banning of arms that were what they deem military weapons. They can't do that. They know this is going to fall. And so that's why states like Massachusetts, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Colorado, are all rushing. Virginia's one of the most recent examples, all rushing to pass these arms ban to muddy up the courts, to muddy up the waters before the Supreme Court rules on it, which is going to happen in the next term or two, if you believe Justice Kavanaugh. So the point I'm trying to make is the text doesn't provide for any infringements. In fact, it says the very opposite. It says shall not be infringed. And that's a test, really, of the regulations that you're imposing. Do they meet the constitutional muster? And if they don't, they get to go bye-bye.
So, I mean, I know we keep bringing up court cases and all sorts of things like that. I know that there's 5 or 6 active court cases that are making their way towards the Supreme Court. I know the one in DC, I think it was, just kind of for a little bit there, it was kind of muddying the water, being the first one that actually upheld the Second Amendment as the reasoning why these bans can't be a thing, but then it got overturned in appeal.
I don't think it's been overturned yet. I
Not
think
overturned, it's been suspended.
Well, not suspended. It's been granted en banc review, which means a 3-judge panel came up with that ruling, and then the court was petitioned hard to relook at it en banc, which means all of the judges on that DC Court of Appeals would be impaneled. I think it's 9 total, if memory serves me right. So instead of it just being a 3-judge review, which, again, the Second Amendment won 2-1 in that first pass, now it's going to go before all 9 judges. Will it survive? I don't know. But the truth of the matter is that was the first case to cause not a circuit split, because there isn't a circuit split. They're not a federal court like the First Circuit or the Ninth Circuit or whatever. But it was the highest court in the District of Columbia, and it's equivalent to the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. It's equivalent to a state Supreme Court. So this has created this split of authority, not quite as good as a split by the circuit courts, but it's still a problem, and it's something that the Supreme Court's going to want to solve. If the en banc review ends up overturning the 3-panel review of the case or ruling on the case, then we won't have that split of authority anymore. However, it still is a building block for other states to reference in amicus briefs or, in arguing the Second Amendment in whatever case they're doing. Now, the DOJ has also filed a lawsuit in Denver, Colorado, for the Colorado's ban on assault, quote unquote, assault weapons and large capacity magazines. And they recently amended it to include suppressors in the DC case, I think. So, I think there's a lot to watch, and this still has a lot of moving parts, but I don't think all hope is lost in DC. I think that's still a very good ruling that we should be pointing towards when arguing cases.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think my next kind of question with the whole prospect of maybe the Supreme Court finally taking one of these cases on, finally making a decision, how do you think the state government of Massachusetts or California, Illinois, Virginia, New York, all of those states will react? Will it turn into a kicking and screaming or a quiet resignation?
That's a good question. I think there'll be a little bit of both. I think there'll be response bills filed in state legislatures, but if the Supreme Court rules, it all depends how broad or how narrow the ruling is. Like if they just rule that arms bans are unconstitutional on their face, Massachusetts, Illinois, all those states can go kick rocks. There's nothing they can do about it. If they take on a very specific nature about, a named gun, but they don't have a broad category, then it leaves the door open for further restrictions. And just like the people on our side of the equation always look for loopholes and workarounds, and when the Massachusetts legislature passed Chapter 135, we go, okay, looks like we got to put fin grips on every semi-automatic rifle we sell now. Right. And a lot of people mock us and say, that's ridiculous. You should never have to do that. I agree. It is a complete unconstitutional infringement on my right to keep and bear arms. 100%. I get it. But it enables us to sell the arm and get it into the hands of good people. Whereas if I don't do that, that's not an option. Or I just completely go rogue and say I refuse to comply with your unconstitutional laws because they're void according to Madison v. Marbury, 1803. But then they revoke my license and I go to jail, and yeah, I'm a hero for the cause. But at the end of the day, I'd rather be in the fight and be effective than sidelined because I refuse to think outside the box. So if I think outside the box, I figure out a workaround and we continue business, not as usual, but we continue in business. Whereas the other side does the same thing. Whenever the Supreme Court rules, like they did in the Bruin case, I think 3 or 4 states immediately came with a Bruin response bill. Massachusetts did, New York, New Jersey, I think, a couple other states immediately come up with some workaround that they can throw more spaghetti against the wall and hope it sticks, And then they know that every time they pass a law, it takes usually 6, 8, 10 years to undo in the court systems. So if they can continue to do that, it's the death by 1,000 cuts approach. They can bleed us out, because they're always working with house money in a lot of cases. Attorney generals that are defending the state law against people like me are using taxpayer funds. They're using, government employees. They're not having to raise the funds through groups and donations by people like you and I. In fact, I'm paying for both sides. I'm paying for the FPC or NRA or SAF or Gun Owners Action League lawsuit, and I'm paying through the taxpayer to defend it. So
Right.
It's absolute madness. But
Yeah, I know that. I think that part really bothers me the most. I mean, the fact that I can go walk out into your shop, purchase one of your firearms, I'm going to pay a sales tax on it. Then that sales tax is going to turn right back around, go to the state, and be used to try and strip me of my ability to buy that same firearm.
yeah, that's the most obvious way of looking at it. There's a worse way of looking at it, and that is not only is that taxpayer money going into the Attorney General's office and, to defend against any lawsuits that our side might bring, they're also using that money to give to groups that are committed to making sure your right to keep and bear arms goes away. Through NGOs, the one that was formed to oppose our ballot committee is called Yes for a Safe MA. Their sister organization is the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. They were given a $290,000 grant by Andrea Campbell's office to study the effects of gun violence. And they hired employees, and then a month later, they started Yes for a Safe MA, and they've got this whole campaign going to ensure that your rights stay encumbered by unconstitutional laws. and they're using taxpayer money to do it. That to me is not only a conflict of interest, but it is insulting and tyrannical and frankly treasonous, because every single one of those people, Andrea Campbell, the legislature, the governor's office, executive office of public safety, the legislature, have all sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And then they themselves become the very enemy of the Constitution by the laws that they enact, by the enforcement actions they take, by the unjust rulings that they have in court, and by using taxpayer funds to ensure that your rights are eroded. It's madness.
I mean, I know you said the government's basically giving money to these organizations, you know, and yeah, like you said, it sounds like a massive conflict of interest. Is this one of those things that, could be brought to the state attorney general or potentially even a higher authority to look into?
Well, we did that. We brought this to the Mass Department of Ethics, the Ethics Department, and said this is an outright conflict of interest. You can't use taxpayer dollars to go to an NGO that is committed to taking away people's rights and then watch them start a ballot committee to oppose the ballot, the veto on the ballot November 3rd, and use those funds for that. If you did that, that's called lawfare, or not lawfare, that's electioneering. And you would get in so much trouble if you tried to use taxpayer funds for your candidate or your cause that's on the ballot. You can't do that. We brought it up to the State Ethics Commission, and they said, nothing to see here, folks, move along. They literally don't care.
See, if they don't care, then you couldn't have put in any sort of request to get similar funding from the state.
I would love to get in on the inside and figure out how that happens, but I'm sure that my request will fall on dead ears.
Yeah.
So, God, it sounds like just such an absolute quagmire and a bunch of. I have not pleasant words about what I think about this, but after you formed the Civil Rights Coalition, I know that you basically were doing unprecedented things with the amount of signatures that you were gathering. How exactly did you go about doing that?
Well, I can't take hardly any of the credit. We have a great team. We have a good group of people that were all just like, we're done having our rights infringed. And I think Massachusetts' fight is so important for the rest of the country. There's 26 states that have similar laws on the books like we do, where you can veto a law, where you can amend your constitution, or you can outright write law, which we can write law, we can amend it, and we can veto it. And so I would say that what happens here in Massachusetts, the rest of the country should take notice, because no one's coming to save us, right? That's what we say in firearms training world all the time. There's not someone who's going to ride over the hillside at sunset and save us here in Massachusetts. There's no national group that can do that. There's no one person that can do that. If we don't do it, then we deserve what we get. James Madison wrote in the Federalist 49 that we the people are the true fountain of power. And we can show the world that by exercising that power on November 3rd and vetoing this horrible law that was passed. But also we can give a good idea to the rest of the country that just relying on the courts, just relying on elections, just relying on sending emails and making phone calls and putting out a yard sign and a bumper sticker, there's more you can do. You can actually flex and show that power. I know not every state has that, right? But you can do it. And I'm sure at some point the window will close, the door will close on this opportunity. It's Article 48 under the Constitution that gives the people of the state the right to veto any law that the legislature makes. And this is a perfect example of why that's so important. So the grassroots effort that happened was 40, 50 years of people in Massachusetts sick and tired of being kicked in the you know what and told that every negative outcome that happens with a firearm is your fault. No, it's not. My guns sit in a safe at home. They don't do anything bad or nefarious without, a human being associated with that. Meanwhile, we see soft on crime DAs and judges, especially, letting out career criminals out of jail early, commuting their sentence. The Massachusetts Parole Board has let out nearly 40 first degree murderers because they were convicted between 18 and 20, so they can't be sentenced under the SJC now for life without parole. And so they've let them out. They just let them out of jail. And so they're doing that, making us less safe by letting violent criminals out of jail, all the while telling you and I that we're the problem because we cling to our guns and our religion and our God or whatever it is. And then, every time something bad happens with a firearm, they cry for more gun control instead of actually fixing the problem. They don't want to fix the problem. They want the constant narrative that guns bad, guns bad, guns bad. Here, see, look at this. Guns are bad. Like they're already doing about the shooter in Cambridge, right? Saying, oh, yeah, Tyler Brown, he's bad guy with a gun. And now we got to create new law to make it illegal to shoot down the middle of a street in broad daylight. It's already breaking every law known to man. So,
No, I saw a lot of people were saying like Chapter 135, as it is, should have prevented him from even having that firearm and all of its capabilities. And then the Marine that thankfully was on the scene had his firearm. He was limited, because he could only have 10 rounds in his handgun when, it should have been able to hold significantly more. It I feel like a lot of people are starting to wake up and they're starting to see like, okay, wait, maybe these laws don't work. And the one guy that did show up that was a good guy with a gun, he was severely hampered by our laws and his ability to respond to that threat. So I think, initially when it happened, obviously the media blow up because AR-15 style weapon was used in a shooting. But then as soon as people started to question the laws and how much they actually do, I think the media just kind of shut up about it.
oh, yeah.
Because I haven't seen anything really in the news about it since like a day or two after it happened.
Well, it didn't fit the narrative, So Chapter 135 was the promise that would keep us all safer. We see a career criminal out of jail because the Mass Parole Board, let him out. He was, on parole. And lo and behold, he's got a gun that would have been hard for you and I to go purchase legally in this state, if not impossible. And then instead of acknowledging, hey, we screwed up and we let this bad guy out of jail, they're doubling down on, oh, yeah, we need to make more laws and do the only law. Jim Wallace, the director of Gun Owners Action League, said it best. The only law that helped save lives that day was the Second Amendment. There was no part of Chapter 135 that made anybody safer based on what happened that day. In fact, it proved beyond a shadow of a doubt how it makes society less safe because the good guys who could have prevented that or responded to that might not have had a gun on them that day because, hey, maybe they had to go pay their taxes at town hall. And guess what? You can't bring a gun into town hall anymore. Maybe, and even the gentleman who you pointed out, the LTC holder, he had his gun locked in the back seat in a safe that he had to now retrieve. He could have been dead just trying to retrieve his gun because that guy was just shooting randomly. And you're right, he was limited to 10 rounds or less in his gun, which is not, he shot every round he had in his gun. And that guy still was a threat. So yeah, the whole law makes us less safe and encourages psychos and evil people to go to those gun-free zones and do exactly what we saw that day.
Yeah, I mean, especially with what happened in Cambridge, I obviously am an LTC holder. I possess a concealed carry handgun. I really never brought it anywhere with me. And I think the events in Cambridge really kind of woke me up, and so now I leave the house for 5 minutes to go up the road. I'm taking it with me because
Yeah.
I know one of the victims. He was just on his way to go get his car washed.
Mhm.
You know, something so mundane you don't think like, oh, I could run into a problem. I should have a firearm on me.
Yeah.
Is that complacency that I used to be a victim.
Mhm.
Thankfully, now since that happened, I carry it even when I just am running up the street to get coffee
Mhm.
because you truly never know in this day and age.
Right. Unfortunately, that is the truth. You never know where you'll be or what you're doing when evil decides to visit you. And thankfully, somebody was there that not only could but uh, did respond, because a lot of people would run the other way. Even with a gun. It's not our job to protect society. We're just trying to go about our business. And when good people do something, that's when society wins. And you know, unfortunately, there was a lot of people in harm's way, and I believe government put them there. So, and obviously, the guy with the gun is the first to blame. Not a very good guy, so he should be in jail where he belongs.
Yeah, it's and I mean the most recent charge, if I remember correctly, was assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, attempted murder. He fired 13 rounds at two police officers.
So how did he get the gun to shoot the police officers, and then how did he get this new one?
Apparently, it's not very hard to find a gun if you're a criminal or a career criminal. They know where to go, who to see, and where to buy them. That's the yeah, crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, even with the whole thing of law-abiding citizens, I had I was honored to be able to speak with Kyle Colta yesterday,
Mhm.
um, and hear his story.
Mhm.
Of just law-abiding citizen trying to move to Massachusetts, and now he's got a criminal record.
Well,
You know,
we'll see what happens. They're treating him like a criminal, that's for sure. They treated him worse than most criminals because they locked him in jail for 120 days without the potential to bail himself out under the dangerousness statute, all for possessing a constitutionally protected, um, firearm that he bought legally and lawfully in Arizona. It doesn't make any sense.
no, it doesn't. Or like the instance of the nurse from Connecticut,
Mhm.
who's currently sitting in prison
Yeah,
for having a handgun.
yeah. I mean, her case hasn't been adjudicated yet either, but it's amazing to me that the state is uh, more interested in locking up good people with firearms for their violation of technicalities in our law than they are locking up career criminals who have proven to be a danger to society by assaulting police officers, by um, you know, um, dealing drugs and assaulting witnesses with firearms or knives or whatever it is, and that's the reality on the ground.
It truly is tragic, but I mean, if anyone wants to help support the Civil Rights Coalition in their fight to overturn Chapter 135, how exactly would they go about doing that?
Yeah, the best way is to go to thecivilrightscoalition.com. You can volunteer right there on the page. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can donate right through the website. And we definitely need people to step up. Like I said, no one's coming to save us. There's not some sugar daddy in the sky coming to, salt this campaign. This is a boot on the ground grassroots effort. And we're very fortunate that people have responded well, but there's so much work to be done between now and November 3rd. We need all the hands we can get. We need all the money we can get. The usual suspects will be donating to the other side. The Brady, the Everytown, the Moms Demand, the Giffords, the Bloombergs, um, all the usual suspects will be donating. They've spent upwards of 20 and $30 million on a ballot committee before in other states. So I don't think this one's going to fall through the cracks. They're going to be dumping money and they're going to be dumping resources. And it's our job just to educate the people that say, hey, I don't think knowing you for who you are, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, I don't care. But 73% of likely voters in our state support the right to keep and bear arms and the Second Amendment. I think you're one of those people, and if you are, do you think it's okay that the legislature just voted our rights away? And if you are okay with that, what other rights would you be willing the legislature to vote away? What's next? What other one would you be okay with? And as we start to educate people and say, like, yeah, you know what? Our rights should never be negotiable. Our rights are non-negotiable. They are rights for a reason, which means they can't be taken away. They're not granted by our legislature. Therefore, they can't be encumbered or taken away by our legislature. So go into the civilrightscoalition.com, sign up, volunteer, spread the message, spread the word, email it, share this video to someone who might not even be aware of what's going on in Massachusetts. It's the best way.
Well, I know a lot of people always say volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. What kind of volunteer work do your volunteers actually do?
Yeah. No, it's there's a lot of work to be done. There's more work to be done than is we even have needs for at the moment. As we get close to election, we're going to need people knocking on doors, making phone calls, sending out letters, sending out postcards. We're going to need people distributing signs throughout the state. We're going to need people manning a booth at an event. We're going to need people, with rack cards and literature and holding a sign maybe at a rally or a parade or an event. So there's a lot of that. And then, putting their money to work is also a way that for busy people who don't have time to do all that, they can, let their money do the walking and help us to buy those signs or the ads or the radio or the billboard or whatever it is, or the yard signs, because there's a huge need there. But yeah, maybe your strong suit is talking to people. Maybe your strong suit is sharing a video. Maybe your strong suit is, putting a sign out and distributing signs. Maybe it's going to a town meeting and speaking up. There's a whole host of ways people can get together with us on the grassroots level.
All right, that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, as we're approaching the end here, do you have any other, additional things that you wanted to say that I might not have asked you about?
The one thing I would say is I understand that 60% of our state is not a Democrat or Republican. And a lot of left-leaning voters have never, even if they're sympathetic to the Second Amendment, they've never had an outlet, right? The candidates they vote for don't generally support the Second Amendment. If you look at the Mass Dems official party platform, it says right in there that they want to repeal the Second Amendment and replace it with strong and meaningful gun control. So that is the agenda of the Massachusetts Democrat Party. But I'm talking to the 60% of the state voters who go independent, that vote Republican or Democrat or maybe a little of both, or even the Democrats that don't typically have that outlet to support a strong 2A candidate because it doesn't align with all the other values. This has nothing to do with a party. This has nothing to do with a person. This has nothing to do with a candidate. This is a straight up or down. Do you want to move the needle back towards freedom, or do you want to continue towards a dystopian tyranny? Because that's the direction we're headed. Ironically, the people who are loudest about, the no kings and stuff like that, a lot of times align with taking guns away from lawful, peaceful people and making sure that government has a monopoly on violence. That doesn't make sense. If you don't want to have the king or the, tyrannical government, then you probably shouldn't give them all the power, right? You should probably recognize that's where the Second Amendment comes in. And I believe it's just like the First Amendment, it's an amendment that protects all Americans. Left, right, center, it doesn't matter. I don't care what you believe. This is a straight up or down vote. Do you want to repeal this march towards this dystopian future and bring it back in line? And after we repeal Chapter 135, we're still going to have an assault weapon ban. We're still going to have a magazine capacity ban. We're still going to have license to carry. We're still going to have an FID card. It's not like, we're New Hampshire tomorrow and we have no gun laws. We will still be one of the most gun controlled states in the country. It just shows how far government has been willing to go. So I would urge everybody, go to the polls November 3rd, left, right, center. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, and vote no on Chapter 135 and restore an incremental portion of your rights and show government that we're not the problem. Go after the people who are and leave our rights alone.
Yeah, and what is it? Every authoritarian government, one of the first things they do is take away people's guns because once you're disarmed, you're compliant.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, I would like to thank you so much for giving me your time today, Toby. I feel like we got a lot of great information out there. Anyone watching, please make sure that you share this, episode around. We need more people to be aware of what's going on in Massachusetts. We need to overturn Chapter 135.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thanks.